Excellent. Okay, so wonderful to meet you all on this virtual platform today. Yeah, I'm hoping that we can start to look at the mechanics around how you can succeed with the cloud through the way that Microsoft's been able to help the customers throughout the years in adopting cloud and trying to get the most out of the technology that we provide. So what we'll be going through is, firstly, what's really important to me is obviously getting us all on the same page as to what the cloud is. I want to then look at what's driving companies to the cloud, look at some common pitfalls and challenges that customers generally make on their journey to the cloud, because I think it's a good point of reflection for us. And then I'll be talking about how we typically view and approach view and give you our view and approach on how we try and get cloud right when we're engaged with customers, etc. So thanks for the introduction. I won't elaborate too much further on that, Mark, thank you. So yeah, I've come from a business and IT strategy and operation consulting background. I've been doing it for the last 18 years. I've been at Microsoft for 5 years in what we call the Culture and Cloud Experience team, which is made up of modern service management, adoption and change management, user experience, and application consulting. And for those that are interested, I've also hosted a podcast show called The Search for Clarity, where we focus on all things digital strategy and management. And I get to speak to some of the global industry heavyweight thought leaders on a lot of these topics to try and dispel a lot of myth and confusion around these, to try and really get to the crux of what the intent behind the thinking is. I'll give you more details on that at the end of the session. Right, so what is the cloud? Let's get on the same page. So a raw definition of it is that it's not a physical entity. It's a vast network of remote services around the globe, all operating as a single ecosystem designed to store and manage data, run applications, or deliver content. So now I don't want to be the person or that kid at school who tells you that Santa Claus isn't real and shatters your entire these dreams and aspirations you've been having about Santa Claus. But there is no actual cloud, everyone. It's just someone else's computer at the end of the day. And this is an important piece for me because I think it's a bit of a reminder as to what we're dealing with when we keep talking about things like the cloud and using these terms. We're sharing infrastructure with another organization. We're partnering with that organization to start delivering services. And that partnership is a really important thing because we can't have the one organization doing one thing and you as the customer doing something else and not having alignment. And when that happens, that's when we typically start to see issues. So we'll be talking a lot about that partnership as well. But before we move to that, let's first look at what the types of cloud are. So we've got public cloud, which is where we share resources and offer services to the public over the internet. And that's what you'll typically find with most cloud service providers today. We've got private cloud, which is when an organization has its own cloud offers and services on their own internal network. You've got a hybrid cloud, which would be a mix between having on-premise infrastructure and virtualization platforms, as well as public or private cloud components. And then we've got one called community cloud, which is where you're sharing resources between organizations, such as with government institutions, etc. And I didn't mention it here, and I should have. But of course, we've got different service models for cloud. You've got your infrastructure as a service, which is really your virtual machines, your network infrastructure, and all the bottom end stuff that you have in your cloud. You've got your platform as a service, which is services offered that really simplify the management of the back end. You're kind of just dealing with the front end of the application. So you can think of that like as your web app development. You can just develop on this front end and not have to worry about the VMs in the background. Microsoft manages all of that for you. That's called a platform as a service. And then you've got software as a service like Office 365 or any other type of SaaS offering where you're just consuming the application without the worry of any of the application architecture or any of the infrastructure behind it. That's all being managed by your service provider. And the cloud platforms that Microsoft provide, we've got our Azure platform, which is really all the ingredients you would need to build any form of cloud service. You've got Microsoft 365, which is really focused on productivity and enhancing the organization's productivity and how organizations work. You've got Dynamics, which is a platform for making, very powerful platform for orchestrating key business capabilities. And then we've got Microsoft Power Platform, which is now a brilliant platform for, that Power BI sits on, that you may all know. And we've got Power Automate to, automate business queries and workflows. And then one of my favorites, of course, is the Xbox platform, which is where, once we've finished our work for the day, we get to do some more social things and shoot our friends in the faces on our Xboxes. So this is kind of the very high level, what is the cloud? This is the sort of message that I wanted to make sure we were all starting on the same page with. So what's driving customers to this model, that's been provided by many different cloud service providers? Well, the first major one is innovation. So we'll talk about this digital economy that we're in a minute, but really it's about the fact that we need to be more innovative and we need to be quicker in providing innovation because we're in a very disrupted, turbulent environment, both from a technology standpoint and competitors coming up with new, innovative, new ways of doing things, but also, of course, with things like the pandemic, changing the way we work and being able to quickly adapt to that and still remain competitive in the industry. So that's one of the things. Cloud provides access to very emerging, cutting edge technologies that you're able to use to be more innovative within your organization. The other reason is costs. So yes, if you're not doing cloud correctly and you're not architecting things correctly, cloud can in fact be far more expensive. But if you are using cloud correctly, designing it correctly, you are able to get much more scale and economics and make significant cost savings in how you deliver the value of infrastructure or software to your organization. The other one is agility. So you don't need to wait 6 months for a server or for any new type of service to be rendered, like artificial intelligence. You don't need to wait for that to be built and modeled. That is all available by the click of a button in the cloud. And that means that we can do things far quicker. And business is obviously going to become more agile based on the fact that these things are more available and more easily accessible. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist or a data scientist necessarily to be able to consume and use many of these services. And then the structure of it. Again, if you're architecting according to cloud best practices, you are able to get much more faster, predictable responses to change, and of course, zero downtime on your services. You can get far better availability on your services if you're architecting it correctly in the cloud. So these are kind of some of the ideas, and I'm sure there'll be others that you might be able to identify that have been key drivers behind why you've moved to the cloud. But these are typically some of the main reasons why people would want to move to the cloud. So what are the common cloud adoption challenges that we're picking up on? So the first one is that there is no clear cloud strategy. And what this really refers to is that when we engage with people very often, and prior to me even working for Microsoft, we're going cloud first. Well, that's great, but that's a very short-term and narrow view of what cloud can do for your organization. And without a very clear view and a holistic strategy on how you want to map cloud use to your business strategy, you're not really going to be getting the full customer impact and experience and transformational opportunities or innovative opportunities that you really have access to. So not having a clear strategy is one of the biggest stumbling blocks, because it means that the cloud gets adopted in a very specific way and can sometimes be a very mitigated way of effective adoption. The other one is that very often we find organizations have started out using cloud as a pilot of sorts or a proof of concept, and all of a sudden, before you know it, you're in production mode and you haven't really operationalized or gone through a process of operationalizing that POC to a production environment. And what ends up happening there is that you've got a great you've got this great solution, but you don't have adequate support, or you don't have an adequate experience that's been built onto that for the people who are trying to consume it. This also leads to the next one, which is a lack of service architecture. And this is quite a common one. There is extensive focus on the design and implementation architecture and making sure that we're getting, the product right. But again, we're doing this at the detriment of not aligning to actual customer requirements, the end user or the customer, and what the value expectation is. What is the actual value we're trying to produce here? How do we measure that? How will it impact, and this is all going to then impact the adoption and the successful adoption of that service. And again, support or scalability issues may occur due to the fact that we haven't thought about the end-to-end experience of a customer through a more service-oriented architecture and approach. Digital and cloud skills, a lack of those is another massive common one. So when we're engaged, I mean, one of the key capabilities that we really try and drive customers to start getting in place is an automation team, a team that can focus exclusively on automation. Because if you are able to, you can automate literally anything in the cloud. You don't need to have anyone do anything in the cloud. You can have very minimal touch. And that is where you're really harnessing the power of the cloud, is you're then freeing up your resources to focus on more exciting, more important work. But the problem is that many customers have not got the skills to drive that level of automation, and they're still not investing heavily enough in that because they're not seeing it as a critical success factor to their cloud journey. And so they're not investing adequately in those types of digital skills, understanding how cloud monitoring works and making sure you're having very clear end-to-end monitoring strategies. How does cost management work? How do you get cost information and then make sense of that and, expedite costs, or overrun costs, or optimize your costs, your consumption of services, should I say. Following that, your support model is not aligned or optimized. So very often customers that we were engaged in don't have major incident response plans for their cloud services, which means that, when something goes cataclysmically wrong, there's this wall of confusion that occurs. They don't know how to get a hold of Microsoft or any of the other cloud service providers to try and get this expedited. And so there's a much longer process to try and get things fixed. They'll send information over to Microsoft. It won't be the right information. It will be inadequate. We won't be able to troubleshoot effectively. And then we'll all find out that, it's a really silly issue that could have been mitigated or resolved a lot sooner had we all just got on the same page by making sure that the vendors and all key staff and Microsoft are on the same DL and communicating, or should I say, sorry, the same distribution list, and all communicating immediately once the issue occurs. There's also an issue where we don't have any integration to our cloud providers' endpoint monitoring systems. So, when Microsoft says we've got an outage on a particular service, you need to know that at your service desk. Your engineers, your third-tier engineers should know about this and already be preparing communications and tracking the issue, as opposed to getting the end users coming in and saying, this isn't working, and then chasing your tail trying to find out where this issue may be, when your cloud service provider has quite clearly indicated on their platform that there is an issue here. And then finally, the other one is that if many customers just immediately escalate issues to their cloud service provider without going through their service desk. And what they do there is they rob themselves of the opportunity of building the cloud support capability that they need to be self-sufficient and actually drive effective support for cloud at a much faster pace within the organization. They lose the possibility of learning. They lose the ability to trend and analyze incident data, because they're ending up being perpetually requiring the service provider to provide support. And unfortunately, the service provider doesn't have the context of the customer, and so the service provider will do their best to try and support the issue, but you will never have the business context that the customer has. And if we're not marrying that context up in the customer service desk, we're losing out on a lot of critical information. And then, of course, another one is not having your change models correctly aligned and optimized to cloud. So, gone are the days of the notion of a cab for every single change that a cloud provider says that they're going to be rolling out. Because in essence, your cloud service provider is just pushing stuff out. They're supporting thousands, if not millions, of customers. So they're making changes, and they're telling you well in advance about these changes. And it's up to you to prepare yourself for those changes, make any amendments or adjustments within your organization, and then of course making sure that you're triaging those, understanding what the adoption requirements are, planning your adoption so that when the release does occur, your end users are ready for it, your your infrastructure is ready for it, and you sort of just take that change in your stride. And that's another very important concept that many customers aren't getting right at this stage. And there, of course, are more, but those are the main ones that we sort of want to focus on today. So how are we, as you know, how do we typically assist our customers in getting to understand their environments better to manage the cloud? Well, the first thing is we have to stop and realize that, you know, at the end of the day, we've got a digital strategy in place. What's a digital strategy? It's an amalgamation between the business strategy and the IT strategy to provide digital type of services to the business customers and the your business users, your business customers, to make sure that they're getting significant value. The challenge is, of course, in a digital economy, is that customers' behaviors have changed. They're spoiled for choice. They have low switching costs. They can change from one provider to another very, very quickly. So businesses are finding themselves in a very difficult position because they now need to learn how customers are buying, what their usage behaviors are, and making sure that they're aligning to that. They're needing to make sure that they're rapidly trying to effectively respond to these changing customer trends and making sure that they're orchestrating their entire operating model to make sure that the left hand knows what the right one is doing. And this is a really difficult challenge. So you have to be really innovative with the use of your technology, and you need to really deeply understand who your customer is, what their needs are, know that they're satisfying most of their needs through a mobile app or on their phone or on a website now. And so you have to understand that world better than anyone else for that particular customer. And you need to understand what job it is that they're trying to get done, and understand exactly how you can unlock value through your services to make them draw to you as a provider and make them want to consume your service over and above everyone else. That at its essence is what digital transformation is actually about. You know, forget the buzzwords, forget everything else. That's the raw elements of what has spurred on and what digital transformation is. It's just the fact that consumers are consuming services in a much more different way today, and we as organizations need to figure out how we're going to compete in that new landscape. And our competitors are currently providing value in that space. How are we going to compete with them? How are we going to do things differently to them to make sure that we're keeping and retaining our customers and understanding them, you know, in a much more deeper fashion? So once we've got that digital strategy figured out, and I'm not going to focus too much on that because that's not the point for today, we need to understand how we're going to construct that value and build that value in an orchestrated fashion, and ensure that our operating model within our organization is aligned to be able to deliver that. And every organization is going to follow. And if you've seen ITIL 4, you'll be able to see a lot of parallels here. Every organization has got these stages of value creation that occur in order for you to be able to provide value to customers. And those are really built around strategizing, designing, building, transitioning, operating, and managing and governing that, that value. And if you boil any service organization down to its very basic components, what you get are what we call capabilities. And what you're looking at right now is essentially an operating model where we're highlighting the phases of value creation and the capabilities that will ensure that that value is created in a specific way across that operating model. Now, what are capabilities? Capabilities really are the people, the processes, the technology, and the partners that come together within a particular context to provide a certain type of ability. So if I look at requirements engineering, it'll be your BAs, your business requirements engineering process, the tools you're going to use to manage business requirements through their life cycle, and your partners that will be involved in that process, that are all pulled together to form a requirements engineering capability to enable you to do effective requirements gathering and management, to ensure that when you design things, you're doing them more effectively. And so the level of proficiency an organization is on any one of these capabilities will depend on how they've gone about trying to adopt best practices. There's a whole lot of best practices out there that help organizations understand what level they want to operate on a capability, and help them get that capability up to a certain level of proficiency. Unfortunately, what happens is we become very much like a cult, and we focus on a particular framework and methodology to the detriment of this entire operating model and system. if we look at, and I'm not picking on any framework, in fact, I'm not going to mention any frameworks, but I'm sure that you'll know which ones that are out there that people, you mention the word and everyone just goes and they go bananas, that's not how the framework says. And, we're supposed to do it this way. And this is how teams should be set up across the organization according to the framework. But we need to be thinking bigger than frameworks. Frameworks are really important tools. They focus the mind on sorting out certain problems. But we shouldn't be doing it at the detriment of what we're trying to do, and that is orchestrate all these capabilities in such a way that we provide value and enable a strategy to provide value to a person. It's a person we're trying to provide value, and we're trying to create, align everything in an organization just to provide value to someone, to make sure that we keep them on as customers and they trust us and they want to be with us because we understand them and we really know how to address their very specific needs. So when you move to the cloud, guess what? You're introduced to a whole bunch of new best practice and frameworks that your cloud service provider is going to provide you. There are cloud adoption frameworks. There's the well architecture framework. How do you architecture cloud correctly? How do you adopt cloud services effectively? How do you make sure cloud services are accessible and that they're easy to use? So the challenge is, how do we now get to blend these different frameworks together in a much broader context to ensure that we're unlocking value? And what I'm trying to illustrate to all of you here is that we need to take a bigger, more contextual focus. In other words, if we're going to design a cloud service, we need to make sure that we're designing it consistently and against best practices that are provided by your cloud service provider. Because if your cloud service provider changes something, they're doing it according to their architecture. If you're not following the same architectural best practices, it will result in you seeing downtime. I'll give you an example. Microsoft might do an update on a data center, and we will update certain racks within that data center. One of our key architectural design principles is that you have to create virtual machines in high availability, meaning that you need a virtual machine, an instance of it in the one data center, but you need another instance in another data center. Because what will happen is and Microsoft says, if you don't do that, we're not going to be giving you an SLA. Because when we do an update on one of our racks, and you've only got that one VM, then I'm very sadly, you're going to get downtime. So we've got all these best practices to make sure you're building for high availability, for resilience, and for all these things. If you're not following those, you're designing services that are going to fail. So your design management capability needs to be highly proficient in cloud design. Change management, as I mentioned before, when we start rolling out changes, to make sure that you're benefiting from the latest and greatest, if you aren't following that roadmap and making sure that you're familiar with the change, that you're aware of what's going to be happening, and you're not doing it early enough to start engaging with Microsoft or your other cloud provider to understand the nature of that change and its potential impact to you, this thing might just land on your lap one day and you're not going to know what to do with it. It's very important that your change process is aligned to this new way of early warning, early view of changes, to place business context on it and triage it correctly. And of course, we talked about support, and there's all these other elements here that I'd love to go into, but we don't have the time. The key message I'm trying to get across is there are some important conversations you need to be having across your entire business environment. How are you going to manage adoption and change? Are you doing that formally? Do you have a process for making sure that when you create a new service, you're looking at how you're going to create a communications plan, a resistance management plan, a sponsorship plan, a coaching plan, a training plan, whatever it might be, to ensure that your people are able to adopt this cloud service, because it's going to be a new way of working for you. How are you making sure that your service management capabilities are aligned to cloud, the fast-paced nature of the cloud, are delivering the level of competency expected out of the capabilities that I'm showing you here? How are you designing from a user experience perspective your services so that they're easily accessible, that they really do unlock the value to the end users? It's easy to use to ensure that you're promoting the need or the want to adopt these services. And then you need to be integrating with your cloud provider to make sure that you are getting that unified shared responsibility between how Microsoft's managing their environment and how you are managing your environment, and how you are collectively going to manage together to make this a successful transition. And of course, then building the correct service models for all of your cloud services so that they are successful. I know my 5 minutes is there. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
What we're saying is that your services are what coordinate these capabilities to ensure that you are providing the correct experience for who? Some person somewhere who needs help in trying to adopt or use a particular service or technology so that they get the most out of what they're trying to do on a daily basis. And we mustn't lose sight of that, because when we focus too much on the best practices and so forth, I think we sometimes forget who we're trying to serve. We must be serving them beyond just the frameworks, the best practices. We need to be looking at how our entire organization comes together to deliver our strategy correctly. So how do we get this right? We need to see the wood from the tree. We need to stop seeing, excuse me, the wood from the trees, and we need to look at a target operating model view. So don't focus on efforts in a single area, like, oh, we're just going to focus on getting our cloud team up and running with, delivering IaaS services and a hosting service. No, think bigger. How is this going to impact your strategy? How is this going to impact your end users and your customers? And how will this be scalable to affect the whole cloud? So don't look at support models just on, just Office 365 or Microsoft Teams. How are you going to make sure your support models align to any cloud service that you are going to be on-ramping and rolling out? Because that capability needs to be there, and your change, the same for change. Those capabilities need to be there for any cloud service that you're providing, not just these small pockets that most companies tend to do. You need a roadmap, and you need to prioritize your strategy. So don't spread yourself too thinly on many of these lower impacting initiatives in cloud. Consolidate it all into one strategic program of work and ensure you are clear on what needs to happen to meet your strategic objectives. Don't lose sight of your strategy on your cloud journey. Don't get caught up in the technology. Focus on what your strategy is as a business. How is what you're doing today impacting that strategy? And how do you prioritize the way in which you're going to impact your strategy? Design for service, because service equals customer experience. Place more emphasis on how you're going to design that end-to-end service. Understand your customer's journey. Understand how they're going to consume your service across that entire journey. Make sure that you understand how they're going to use your technology through that whole entire journey. And remember that services make use of multiple products. So if you create a hosting service, that could be one of the components or products of many that provide an end-to-end service for a customer. You need to understand that. That's very important. You need to build capabilities and platforms that can scale, and you need to promote adoption. So establish service management as a capability. Establish cloud as a capability to ensure that you can run these platforms and they can be architected and scaled accordingly. And very importantly, make sure that cloud is a shared model between you and your service provider. Engage more with your provider for alignment. Understand, how they manage their part of the environment and what their expectations are for you to manage yours, and vice versa. Integrate with the technology so you're getting insights into your service desk tools, so you know when things are down, you know when changes are going to happen. You've got more clarity and so forth around what your cloud provider is doing. The next steps really. So I'm hoping there was value in that. It was really just to provide you the broader context of cloud and cloud strategy. And if you're wanting to take the conversation further, you can most certainly connect with me or speak to your Microsoft. If you want to help from a Microsoft context, speak to your customer success account manager or your account delivery executive or customer success manager, and they will be able to help you in taking this conversation forward. Or you can connect with me. You could also follow my my podcast, The Search for Clarity. And of course, for more information on any of the stuff, I've provided a bunch of resources that you might find interesting on how Microsoft helps our customers onboard to the cloud. So I hope that was of value to all of you. Thank you very much.